Good evening. Please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to Sumter School District Monthly Board Meeting. This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. This meeting is open to the public. All persons wishing to attend this meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board Meetings and Sumter School District's Facebook page. Vision. Sumter School District develops and cultivates competitive students who embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively to society. Mission. The mission of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. The board members are yours truly, Barbara Jackson, Chairwoman, Dr. J. Frank Baker, Seat 8, Vice Chair, Dr. Darrell McGaney, Area 5 Clerk, Mr. Brian Alston, Area 1, Mrs. Cheryl Ray, Area 2, Mr. Mac McLeod, Area 3, Dr. Johnny Hilton, or John B. Hilton, Area 4, Dr. Gloria Rose Lee, Area 6, Dr. Sean Reagan, Seat 9, Ms. Denise Jones, in her absence, she is the Shore Air Force Base representative, Dr. William T. Wright, our superintendent, and Ms. Shantae Scott, our administrative assistant. This meeting is called to order. Welcome to Chestnut Middle School. I'd like to thank the principal, Ms. Janaea Edwards, and her staff for hosting this meeting. Thank you so much. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will stand approved. The guidelines for public participation, the Board of Trustees is pleased to offer time at our regular monthly board meeting each month for public participation, both in person and electronically. According to our policy, the board will allocate 15 minutes at the onset of each meeting for public to address the board. The chairman reserves the right to limit discussion of the same topic issues in an effort to provide individuals the opportunity to be heard on a variety of topics. Public participation will not exceed 3 minutes for each individual unless waived by a majority vote of the board. Consideration may be given to a public hearing for gaining input on critical issues. Speakers may offer objective comments on school operations, programs, and programs that concern them. The board will not permit in public sessions any expression of personal complaints about individual school personnel or any other person connected with the school system. At this time, we will open the floor for public comments not to exceed 15 minutes or 3 minutes for each participant. Following in-person comments, Executive Director of Communication and Community Engagement, Mrs. Shirley Galloway, will read the electronically submitted submission, if any. I've only received one request for public participation, and that is Ms. Michelle Harrelson. Would you please come and have a seat at the table? You have 3 minutes to express your concern. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Wright. This will be my second time speaking to you, as I spoke to you last year, and I'm going to bring some similar concerns again this year. So I am an ELA teacher, 6th grade ELA teacher. I have served in Florence School District, Berkeley School District, and I am now currently serving in Sumter County School District. I am very concerned with the school I'm in at this point. It is severely understaffed. Our students are simply not receiving an equitable education. We began August 15th, and as of today, our students have not received their related arts classes for 9 of the 20 days, so that's nearly half. Last year, we hit 90+ of not receiving related arts. Our students, although we are a one-to-one device school district, still have not been issued devices. This makes it impossible to carry out the technology requirements that the school district is asking us to do. I was told by a colleague we've reached up to 20 fights. Some are multiple in the day. We have 2 certified math teachers in the entire building, although I did receive a message that an iTutor 8th grade math teacher started today. However, there is no one permanently in that room covering that class, so that is being covered by our related arts teachers. Our resource students, the last I heard, are being overseen in the media center by our guidance counselor, while our media specialist has primarily covered our 6th grade science class. When we don't have related arts, it knocks out our planning time, which makes it very difficult. We get about 5 minutes to run to the restroom. That's 7:50 a.m. till 4 o'clock or after in the afternoon, with ultimately no break. This makes it a little crazy for us and the students. It's just very unfair. When I did submit, last year we submitted additional pay. Every time we had to cover a class, submit your time, they'll pay you. I was told this year that's not happening anymore. If that's a misunderstanding, I'm just explaining to you what was told to me. Number one, why? The money's there. There's not a teacher there or a sub being paid, so the money is allocated. So I'm very confused to that. Number two, how unfair. Those of us that are there are working very hard. We are covering the time. We should be compensated. That's simple. Finally, there are some things in the building that are just in disarray. Moldy ceiling tiles. I was standing at lunch and I had a drop fall from the ceiling and it nearly landed in my salad. I look up and it's a moldy ceiling tile. Thankfully that didn't happen. I enjoyed my salad, but that's that. We have some amazing students and staff in that building, and I'm going to highlight 2 things because I hate to just say, talk negatively. Last year, our science teacher, our 6th grade science teacher, led our students, and they actually won. If you go back and look, they won the district-wide.
Excuse me one moment, Mrs.
Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry.
Does the board want to give her an extra few minutes, maybe a minute, or with you can? Okay. Okay, I think that they,
I'm almost done.
okay,
I know
well, we
you.
want to allow you to finish, but I needed to get board approval first.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I just want to end on a high note. I just want you to know we have some amazing staff and students and administration in that building. I'm not speaking negatively about any of them. We're tired, it's hard. I just explained to you why. I'm concerned. It is not equitable education. We are going backwards. But I want to end on a high note. Our science teacher, sixth grade science teacher, led the STEAM team, and if you recall, they won district-wide last year. That's a high note. Our track team also did very, very well, and I don't want to misspeak, but I'm pretty sure that both boys and girls came in first last year. We don't have a track. We have a field. So those children deserve better. I'm there to do everything I can, but I'm begging for any help, and I appreciate each and every one of you that have responded or come in person and have heard some of our concerns. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Mrs. Harrison. Okay, we don't have any online submissions to share this evening, so I'd just like to say that on behalf of the board, and I'd like to say to Ms. Harrison, I'm sure that someone will be back in touch with you, the appropriate person to handle that situation. I want to thank the members of the public for expressing your thoughts and or concerns regarding the school district. Wherever or whomever this may be applied to or under their division, the information will be forwarded to them, and a district member that's best capable to answer your question or address your concern. Okay, trustees, are there any announcements that you wish to share at this time?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would just like to encourage my colleagues. I had the opportunity earlier in the month or last month, if you will, to attend the school law conference put on by SCASBA. I would just encourage my colleagues to take a look at the SCASBA website and take a look at some of the handouts from the presentations at that conference. I think those handouts will be very helpful as we govern this school district and keep us up to date on school law changes, policy trends, and things of that sort to help us to be better stewards of the school district and our resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alston. Mr. Reagan?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just want to mention that I too attended that conference, the law conference in Greenville. Also wanted to make mention that I had the opportunity on last Thursday to visit Furman Middle School, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the staff and the work that they're doing over there for children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reagan. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, I would also like to say I attended the conference, and it was a very empowering conference. And again, I would like to say to all my colleagues that attended, we did learn a lot from there. And for those that didn't get to attend, please make sure you go online and review it.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. I would just say that we were very well represented at that conference. In addition to those that have already spoken, Dr. McGaney was there, Dr. Hilton was there, as well as our own superintendent, and I attended as well. So I'd just like to say that we gained a lot of information, and like one of my colleagues said, there are a lot of changes, and we do encourage you to go to the site to read up on the information and learn the changes. We do appreciate our attendance. The attendance was good, and the conference was excellent. So we'd just like to thank you and inform you of what's going on. And many of us also attended one of the football games. And we say kudos to our schools and our players, the cheerleaders, for representing us as well as they do. So thank each and every one. Okay, is there any other announcements? If not, we'll move down to our committee reports. Trustees, are there any committee reports?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Dr. Hilton?
I
I attended the Education Foundation meeting on August the 25th. The Education Foundation serves as the philanthropic arm of the Sumter School District, and the Education Foundation welcomed our new certified staff this year by providing them with a gift certificate to help purchase school supplies for their classrooms. The Foundation's Board of Directors recognizes that these teachers have joined a great profession and an exceptional team of educators. And this gesture, this gesture is just a small token of appreciation to thank these teachers who've joined our team. There were 3 members of the foundation that visited schools this week. Our new chairperson, Patty Patterson, Laurie Merchant, and Denise Wells went around and passed out gift certificates to the new teachers in various schools, and there will be more visits next week. So if a new teacher didn't get their gift certificate this week, last week, they'll get it sometime soon. And we also want to say congratulations and thank you for Patty Patterson for stepping up to become the new chairperson of the foundation upon the retirement of Susan Hilton. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hilton. Any other committee reports?
Yes, ma'am.
Alston, okay.
The policy committee meeting will be held this Wednesday, September 14th at 6 p.m. at the district office. If you're available to attend, we encourage members of the public to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alston. Mrs. Ray.
The Finance Committee met last Thursday, September the 8th, and we reviewed last month's financial reports. Tonight, the board is going to receive requests from the CFO and the superintendent of some changes that they'd like made in the capital funds, and also concerning a salary study. Also, the committee had requested some information that will come to the board, and that's concerning the GPS systems on the buses, security doors, and some concerns about air quality. So those should be coming to the board soon. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ray. Okay, are there any additional? Okay, if not, we're now down to our legislative update, and that is Dr. John Hilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As has already been mentioned, several of us did attend the legislative conference last week, and loaded in your board docs are all of the handouts from Ms. Elmore's presentation that we saw on the last morning. They gave an update on all the new legislation, and it is in board docs now, and it has a summary of all the new legislation related to K-12 education. So in addition to looking at the website, you may look in our board docs here because it's all loaded in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hilton, for the legislative update. We are now to the point, or at the point on the agenda for the superintendent's report. Dr. Wright, would you please proceed with your report and any items that fall under there? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees. I'd like to begin by, first of all, thanking Ms. Harrelson for coming tonight and sharing her concerns. I am, as superintendent of schools, I take it as a direct responsibility to make sure that all of our schools and all of our places have what they need to be successful. Many of the items that you have mentioned we've already begun to assess and address. There are some that have not been, because I didn't know about them, but we'll work towards those tonight and moving forward. Now for the Around the District National African American Recognition Award. We have congratulations are in order to Elena Garrick, Alyssa Baker Milbauer, Bailey Champion, Jada Atkins, all from Sumter High School, and Joe Nickens from Lakewood High School. Congratulations to them for earning the National African American Recognition Program Award. from the College Board National Recognition Programs. And so students who may be eligible have a GPA of 3.5 or higher, and they've excelled on the PSAT/NMSQT or PSAT 10. They also have earned, or they have earned a score of 3 or higher on 2 or more AP exams, are African American or Black, Hispanic, American, or Latinx, indigenous, and or attend school in a rural area or small town. Eligible students are invited to apply during their sophomore or junior year and are awarded at the beginning of the next school year. I'd like to remind everyone that September is Attendance Awareness Month. Attendance is important every day. And did you know that missing 10% of the school year can leave many students struggling throughout elementary school? And then by 6th grade, missing 2 days per month is linked to course failure and dropping out of high school. So building strong, trusting relationships that promote a feeling of belonging is fundamental to improving student achievement and attendance and engagement. So attendance matters. So join us in celebrating Attendance Awareness Month. And then lastly on my list, the Sumter Education Foundation, which serves as a philanthropic arm for the Sumter School District, welcomed our new staff to the 2022-2023 school year by providing them with gift certificates to help purchase school supplies for their classrooms. The Foundation's Board of Directors recognizes that they have joined the greatest profession in the world wasn't up here, I added that, and an exceptional team of educators. This gesture is a small token of appreciation to thank those educators for joining our team. And they will conduct more school visits this week throughout our wonderful district. Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, that concludes my around the district at this time.
Thank you. You may proceed with your other items.
Okay, I'd like to at this time welcome our illustrious Chief Finance Officer, Mrs. Shatika Spearman. She will actually have 3 items under our superintendent's report.
Thank you so much. To our Chairwoman, Vice Chair, Clerk, we thank you for your leadership. I am here to present 3 items to you. To begin, we'll begin with the revenue and expenditures for both years that we are in right now. As it relates to our prior year, I wanted to just do a verbal summary on that because we are awaiting audit field work to begin. For FY 21-22, our total revenue to date is $115,697,179.05, and that represents an 89% collection, and that was as of September 8th. Our expenditure total is at $121,638,051 as an expenditure total. We have other financing sources that we could also add to our revenue at $4.9 million, and other fund transfers out, uses of funds at $1.4 million. Currently, with these raw numbers, unaudited numbers, we're looking at a fund balance of about $30.5 million in our fund balance remaining. Again, that number will change once the audit fieldwork is complete. And as it relates to our current year, fiscal year 22-23 general fund, to date, we've collected $83,841 in revenue, which represents a 0.25% collection. In our local revenue, as far as our state revenue, we have collected $6.08 million, which represents a 5.46% collection for our state revenue, and most of that is the new funding for our state funds that we receive. It's no longer going to be called EFA. Right now, it's still called the new funding formula. And so that represents a total collection this year of $6.16 million. In total, that represents a 4% collection. As it relates to our expenditures, we've expended about $7.9 million in expenditures, which represents a 5.44% spend. So we are about neck and neck on the expenditures and revenue. And currently, our fund balance is projected at $30.175 million. Again, depending on how the fiscal year 22 ends, that'll determine what fund balance we begin the year with. So those are your estimates for your financial activity. Moving on to 5.3, capital projects. We have the capital project status before you, and we also have 2 requests for reallocation to maximize funds. Our first request is for Fund 524 in the amount of $57,913. We would like the board's approval to transfer the warehouse entry gates to an unplanned Furman sewer project or other facility need. This is because the warehouse entry gates were funded from the Security Access Control Funds, and therefore this budget is no longer needed. Our second reallocation request is for Fund 525 in the amount of $112,000. We would like the board's approval to transfer the Ebenezer PA system funds to Ebenezer furniture needs. This PA system is working and does not need to be replaced. That ends the capital projects reallocation request and update. .4, if I may stand to conduct the presentation, I would ask that we have some special guests, our trained representatives, if you could join me at the front.
If I could take a minute of your time, it's been a long time since we've been face-to-face, and my name's John Anderson with Train, and I've been involved in our Train project from day one. And who I have here is James Johnson, also known as JJ, who's been the project manager on the project. And I just want to take a few minutes here. We are so close to finishing.
Hello? Is that better?
Can you hear me? Okay, so close to finishing the first project. If you remember, about a year and a half ago, we entered into an energy savings performance contract. And since that time, we have, especially under JJ's project management leadership, we've been implementing all the energy conservation measures that were in that contract throughout all the facilities in the school district. And it's with something like that, dealing with all the buildings, dealing still with some COVID situations, supply chain issues and everything, it's been a really good project. And I hope that you've heard that as well. 2 things that I think makes that happen. First is the great project manager, and I'll have to recognize this guy and pat him on the back. I've been doing projects for 30 years, and I've got to admit he's probably one of the best, if not the best project manager I've had on one of my projects. Issues come up in these kind of projects, and he's handled them, and you almost don't even hear about them. So that's what you want in the project management, to resolve things, just make sure the project goes well and on time. So thank you very much, JJ. Second of all, and the second piece of that is your folks. You know, the other part of the equation is your team. And I'd like to recognize Mr. Myers and his team for everything that they've done to support us in our project. Shatika and the finance and procurement team that's done an amazing job as well to support us in this project. And lastly, the principals and the assistant principals and all the folks at the schools. They've accommodated us and just been very patient, done a very good job in working with us so we can get this job accomplished for you. So with that being said, part of what we committed to doing for you, knowing that the utility company, Duke, has a rebate program out there, we committed to handling that for you so that you could get a rebate on the energy conservation measures that we were doing. And we've collected all the information and the data. We've submitted that to Duke, and tonight we would like to present the Board of Education with a rebate check of $193,174 for utility rebates for the project that Train's done this evening.
We're gonna keep this, right? We're not here back.
And this concludes my report tonight.
Madam Chair, if I may, at this time, under item 5.5, we have a discipline update report that'll be presented by our very capable Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Sam Myers, and our hearing officer, Mr. Kelvin Williams.
Good evening. Mr. Williams and I are going to give a brief presentation about the discipline in our schools. We know the seriousness of keeping order in our schools, and we're going to share some of the things that have come from that, and we want to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to serve, support, and strengthen our students, our staff members, and our principals in making sure that that is being done on a daily basis. I ask Mr. Williams to go ahead and start with that presentation.
The presentation that we're going to share this evening is the same presentation that we share with our administrators, who then in turn share with their staff, who then in turn share with the students. This presentation basically outlined the code of conduct, administrative rule for maintaining safe and orderly school systems. We'll first start off by course, our new setup has 3 categories. And the way we kind of explain the categories now, we use the state minimum standards to outline our categories. And each category has a definition, and those definitions are kind of important when you start talking about maintaining a consistent line across the different schools when it comes to addressing discipline. So with Category 1, and I'll just read this real briefly, Category 1 addresses activities engaging by students which tend to impede the orderly classroom procedures or instructional activities or the operations of schools, or frequently or seriousness of which disturb the classroom or the school. These are all our Category 1 offenses, and these are the offenses that we tend to ask the teachers to try to address in their classroom. Each administrator is asked to establish a discipline expectation in their building as it outlined, it relates to our discipline policy, and that's the kind of governing piece. That's the continuation of the final offenses. I guess, and this is the, I will say one of the important pieces. This is some of the suggested interventions for administrators and teachers to utilize in their classroom or in the schools to address these levels of behavior, working with the behavior specialists, school counselors, and so on and so forth. And this is the guideline that's set up for Category 1. And Category 1 is the only category that we divided between K-5 and then 6-12, because developmentally those things, those two populations look very different. So this is the guideline for administrators to follow once they investigate a situation, come to the conclusion with the appropriate offense. And this is just a starting point. And when it comes to 6-12, you see it's a little bit more, for lack of a better word, more severe sanctions for that population because of the maturity level and the expectation as our kids migrate through the higher grade levels, the expectations and citizenship changes a little bit. Next is Category 2. Category 2 is when situations get a little bit more serious. And as outlined here, Category 2 are those offenses that are directed against another person or property and the consequence which tend to endanger the health or safety of oneself or others within the school system. And these are some of our more severe categories. And I do want to add something. We reviewed our policy right before the 1920 school year, and we did something a little bit different than what was done in the past. We developed committees, and the committees, instead of being all administrators, we had a combination of folks from the special education department. We had teachers, we had counselors, we had social workers, and we all kind of went in together to look at the policy. We moved it from 4 categories to 3 categories to match the state standards. And we even moved around some of the behavior codes themselves. And we also reached out to the TAC team for their input when we came up with some of those things. And all the behavior codes were sent out to the administrators in the school buildings to kind of identify the most appropriate place based on the definitions there. Category 2 continues. Next slide, please. And here, as you see, also the consequences for Category 2. No longer do we look at K-5 then 6-12. We look at everyone as a whole in this category here. And these are some more suggested consequences for addressing behavior noncompliance in this category. And here's what our administrative rule outlines for those categories. First offense, 1 to 5 days, out of school suspension, and so on and so forth. Now, Category 3, these are more serious categories, offenses. And basically, these are our criminal acts for the most part. There's more suggestions. And here in Category 3, all category offenses, then we practice this model. If there's a violation of a Category 3 offense, it is a referral to the hearing officer. And the consequences depends on the nature of the offense and whether or not the evidence support the offense in question. Now, I kind of quickly ran through that, but all this follows the administrative rule that's in our board policy. It's on all the school websites, schools that have handbook. This is the exact same language that we send home, that we give to our students, that we provide to our parents when requested, and that the teachers go over. Instead of annually, we now do it each semester since we returned to school. Now, although the policy has been in place since 1920, we all know that we spent the first 9 weeks of school during the 1920. Then we were faced with the COVID situation, and this year is our second year back in the school building full-time, second full year back in the school buildings full-time. So the next part of this presentation will give a little bit of data on some of the and here's just a suspension count, and these are just total number of suspensions for the 21-22 school year. For 180 days, we had 10,107 suspensions. And the second one is the first 20 days of school for the 22-23 school year. And we do have it broken up by grade level. And we see our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade was pretty high through 21, 22. And our 9th, 10th, and 6th grade are currently our high flyers for the 22-23 school year. And this is data that we're monitoring ongoing and making our decisions on how to move forward to support our schools annually. The next slide is a breakdown of suspensions based on race. Our African-American students, both year, continues to be the high flyers. So in 21-22, we're talking about 84.6%. And for the 22-23 school year, we're talking about 89.9%. The next slide looks at suspensions based on gender. Our males tend to outrank our females when it comes to suspensions. Now, here we have a breakdown of suspensions by schools, and maybe a little hard to see. The colors kind of changed up on me a little bit. Now we get into our evidential hearing numbers, hearings by grade level. As we see, our 9th graders, last year and this year are high flyers. That's transition year. Hearing by race. I do apologize. I have race compared to gender here. So that's race for 21-22, and that's gender for 22-23. Once again, apologize, I have the slides backwards here. But for 21, 22, you have by gender, and 22, 23, you have it by race. Yeah, I got to mix up. And the final slide is count by schools once again. That concludes my presentation.
This concludes our presentation, and if there are any questions, we'll
Madam Chair,
take questions.
Yes.
can we get a copy of that presentation, please? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Dr. McGee.
Mr. Williams, Mr. Myers, on my clarification. The fiscal year 21, 22, how many suspended, did you not say 10,000 suspended?
10,000.
And did I not hear you say the first 20 days? In FY 21, 22?
Yes, suspension days as of today, what's in the system today. Yes, it's
No, he said 21, 20,
For
21, 22,
21, 22, that's
Which
a,
was last year.
no, that was a
Right.
180-day count.
180.
And
22.
the majority of those suspensions, the highest percentage were African Americans.
That's what the data's revealed, yes, sir.
I'm kind of appalled, that's why I'm looking kind of confused, because the board didn't hear that last year. And we're hearing this now, 10,000 suspensions. That's why I'm looking at, I'm appalled. My next question is, you said the first 20 days of school? Can you clarify that, because I'm confused.
The 22, 23 data,
Not 22, 23, I'm still on 21, 22.
No,
Because 22, 23 is this year, am I correct?
correct.
Now, 21, 22 was for the entire school year,
180
180
days.
days.
Okay, so
Yes,
that's
sir.
the entire school
Year.
year.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
10,000.
Yes, sir.
Where are we now with discipline? Because I'm still hearing from constituents that discipline is a major concern in football games. You know, a lot of activity, and just recently I'm hearing that there was fights at these football games. Where are we with discipline right now? Because discipline is a serious concern for this entire community. So where are we? What are we doing about this? Are we getting the perpetrators, or are we putting measures in place to counteract the discipline right now? Ms. Myers?
Yes, sir. We are, you asked whether we're getting the perpetrators. Yes, sir. We're addressing the issues that are taking place. None of that goes unaddressed. Our administrators and our teachers are working diligently to address some of those things that are happening, and I think we have to keep in mind that many things that do occur are coming from the community to schools, and we find that our students know that that is an opportunity to see that individual on a daily basis, if you will, where they wouldn't see them in the community or wherever they may be. So it comes to school, which means now teachers and administrators have to drop back and address those issues that are happening. So to answer your question, yes, we are addressing those perpetrators, and we are addressing those with the various measures per the code of conduct.
Madam Chair.
Just one moment, please. Let's go on down to my left. I think I saw Mr. Alston hand first. We'll come back to you. Okay, please. Let's give everyone the opportunity, and we'll go back. Mr. Alston, please.
I have 3 questions or 3 points to make. I noticed during the presentation there was an excerpt about students identified as special education. Could you all explain how students that are identified as special education, how their discipline is handled?
It depends on the phase of discipline. If you're talking about a suspension, of course, the schools are mindful of the number of days that they can be suspended. There's a 10-day rule that they tend to follow. If it's a situation that warrants evidentiary hearing or expulsion hearing, in those situations, any student that's identified as a student with an IEP, those students must go through a manifestation process, and that manifestation process is where that IEP team determine whether or not the behavior is related to the student's disability. If it's related to the student's disability, that student is rerouted back to the school, and the IEP team must address, the IEP team make those modifications to address that behavior. If it's not related to the student disability, then that student is forwarded through the expulsion hearing process and is held accountable like a regular ed student. If my recommendation at that point is to remove that student from the school, then that change from a decision becomes a recommendation. That recommendation goes to the IEP team, and the IEP team on the school level will then take in consideration that student disability to determine whether to accept my recommendation or do something different. But anytime there's a student with an IEP, they have to be mindful of that disability, because some disabilities that may manifest as violations of the code of conduct may very well be issues stemming from the student's disability.
I know one of my colleagues already asked for this information to be shared with the board, but are we able to see a breakout of the students with the suspensions as well as the hearings? How many of those students were identified as special education students as well?
Not through that presentation. I would have to add that information because it wasn't requested.
Can that be something that's added?
Yes.
Okay. And my other 2 questions are, I know that since I've been on this board, we have heard countless times that kids aren't being disciplined. And this presentation tonight shows that kids are being disciplined. We've also heard that there's inconsistencies with discipline. And I think we're seeing that now in this presentation. My question to you all and to the administration, maybe this is a question to the board as well. If we're seeing for suspensions, we're seeing suspensions at a high rate in middle school amongst African-American males. As far as hearings, we're seeing hearings at an alarming rate for 9th grade African-American males. What supports are we putting in place to address these 2 demographics? Yes, 9th grade is a transition year. So what are we doing at the middle school level, and what are we doing at that first year of high school to address these disciplinary issues? Is there additional supports that we can add into our schools to address discipline or to help this group of students transition better to middle school and transition better to high school? Because I think it's alarming. Yes, we understand that there is we're in a predominantly African-American school district, but to see suspensions at this rate and see hearings at this rate for these demographics is very much so alarming to me as an African-American male on this board. And know that something seriously has to be done and that we need to do something. Mr. Myers, you mentioned about the community issues. At what point do we look at forming a discipline ad hoc committee as a board where we have community stakeholders? Because these issues are not going to be resolved in a silo of the school district. We have to reach out into the communities because these issues are boiling over into our schools every day. You mentioned it perfectly about football games. if that's the first time that I'm going to see someone, or if I'm at school and that's the first time I want to see someone that I have an issue with in my community, then that's where the incident is going to occur at. So I think it's vitally important that we as a district and we as a board look at maybe forming an ad hoc committee or something to bring community stakeholders to the table to try to address discipline in our schools. If we try to do it alone, we're still going to see these alarming numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson, and let's move on around. And if you could, limit your number to the number of questions, because some of your same questions might be something that someone else want to ask. So, and then you'll have another opportunity to come back around. I think I saw Ms. Ray's hand next.
Yes, did you, and this is something maybe you can give us if you didn't look at it, but comparing to the last full school year that we had, the number of suspensions, if you could give us that so we can see where we stand, if they were that high or if we've made a big increase, if you could do that for us. And then, this is kind of in relation to what Mr. Austin said about the offenses and the so many suspensions, and with the Afro-American children. Can we look at how far off we are proportionately? Because, you know, with how many students that we have, and then even divide that in males and females, because as part of our study, we need to look at that, you know, who are committing these offenses, and how much more out of line it is with the other, like the white and which is our other major category, of course. And then the kinds of offenses that they're doing, because that could also help us try to see what we need to do as we look at the types of offenses. And then there was something confusing in the code of conduct that I wanted to ask, and I know you've already put it down now, but in the categories, you have suggestions of things that can be done, and then we have how you're supposed to address the offense. That was confusing to me, because I saw in category, just for example, category 2 had where you could do an in-school suspension, but then when you look at what the administrators were supposed to do, I think the first thing was a suspension. So I'm just a little confused about when do you use those suggestions and when do you follow the first and second, third offense?
Well, based on the administrative action addendum in the board policy, the board policy actually give administrators the jurisdiction in category 1 and 2 to substitute, and they don't have to necessarily follow that first offense, second offense, third offense as outlined in the administrative rule. So the training that was prepared and those examples came from the state minimum standards. So when doing the training with the administrators, just to give them earmark some things that they can do in lieu of a suspension, you may refer a child to counseling for a violation if they display particular behavior. So the discretion is up to the school, but for the most part, what we see, our administrators tend to follow the 1 through 6 is fairly consistent, but we give it to them because it's in the policy.
And when was that put in the policy as administrative rule?
If my memory serves me correctly, when the district first merged, that was in the policy. It's always been there. It's the addendum after the category 3, and I apologize, I didn't put it in the slide. But if you look at the board policy, the administrative rule, code of conduct, it tells you administrative action addendum for categories 1 through 2. The Board of Education and its administrators will treat all students fairly during the resolution of a disciplinary matter. Administrative actions may vary based upon the seriousness of the behavior and developmental age of the student. The board directs the administrators to adhere to due process requirements when making decisions directly affecting students, protecting the rights under the federal and state laws in accordance with policy JIA. Students do right policy. Actions may range from in-school suspension to permanent expulsion. Administrators must follow the given rudimentary hearing due process, that's oral notice, explanation of the evidence against them. Students given the opportunity to tell his side of the story.
All right, well, my when that was put in, that's when we had 4 categories, am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the first 2 categories at that time would have been detention type things or in-school suspension. Now that we have the 3 categories, category 2, those are pretty serious offenses to not follow those guidelines of suspension for the first offense. And I understand that we do other things along with that, with referrals and counseling and that sort of thing, but to replace an in-school suspension with an out-of-school suspension that's on the code, I think is going a little bit too far. And that was just one thing I noticed. But, you know, I understand giving other options, but and I think that's where we're getting the inconsistencies across, because what kind of training do you give the administrators? I know they use their discretion, but, you know, when is that? You know, how do they know when they're going to use that? And then why would they go down so far as to not go ahead and give the recommended discipline for those categories? Especially, like I said, 2 and 3 now are very serious.
Well, also keep in mind, when it was 4 categories, most of our categories were pre-K 5, then 6-12. Now your 2 is K-12. So if your first suspension is, your first act in category 2 is automatic suspension, and it's a 2-year-old, then it may throw that off. But I can't really speak much on that piece, because those are, that happens on the school level. When I present the evidence to the administrators, I present it based on the policy and how it's outlined. And I have had some conversation with Dr. Wright, and we are planning to revisit the policy, because once, like I said earlier, we did this in 1920, we had COVID, we have new norms, so a lot of the things that we were looking at that time and where time is now is different. So we're kind of in this mode here, but based on the trends, based on some of the things that have been happening in the school, the conversations have already started about how do we move forward to update and align our current policy, what we have going on now through the 22 and beyond.
Yes, and I think that's a good thing, because we do need to do that, to look for the consistency, and also that students understand those very serious things need to have consequences that are equal to what they have done, no matter what age they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ray. I think
Madam Chair.
just one moment, please, Dr. Lee. And I think that ties in, because we have been talking about revision of policies and looking at policies altogether. So that would be an excellent opportunity to make sure that happens. Okay, we will continue to my left, and then we'll come back to my right. I heard Dr. Hilton as well.
Yes.
I saw your hand.
I know the numbers are very high, but I didn't see a chart telling me about repeat offenders. So the children, when they've done these offense, have they done it more than once? Has one person was suspended more than one time? So I didn't see a chart saying that someone repeated it, so it makes the numbers higher. When you see that, it looks like you got all these different people. So do you have a student that's been suspended more than once or twice, and that number is included in that number?
There are students who have committed dual offenses or additional offenses, and I'm pretty sure that is included in there, and we probably have to back that out.
Yeah, because it makes the numbers higher when you do that on there, for us to see that you might have 100 students that might have repeated being suspended for so many times. So that brings the numbers up much higher when you put it on there. So maybe we need to have somewhat of another chart that put down, you know, these are repeated charges from one particular student, and that would kind of like, I would think, bring the numbers down for making it look so outrageously 10,000 for our students, or whatever the numbers are.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. And we're moving back on this end to Dr. Hilton, because I know he had a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, last year, we heard repeated concerns about discipline, and we're hearing them again this year. And I agree with Dr. Lee. We need to know this data that you've given us. How many of these people these students are repeat offenders? What are the total number of students that were suspended? You've told us 10,000 suspensions, but how many of those 10,000 were students being suspended over and over? We need to know the number of students that were suspended and how many times little Johnny was suspended. Was he suspended 5 times for 3 days each, for a total of 15 days? And then do all these suspensions include in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspension? You didn't specify. Are these in-school and out-of-school suspensions or just out-of-school?
But the request was for suspension, so when we look at suspension, that's a combination of in-school.
So these suspensions are in-school and out-of-school, because it's not like we put 10,000 kids out of school. A bunch of these kids were in school. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Could you break it out for in-school and out-of-school for us, please? Sounds like nobody's at the schoolhouse. They all out at home. We need some better data here on who's at home and who's in school, okay? And then my friend Mr. Austin made the comment that we are disciplining students, and this information that we've got is not very clear tonight, and we've asked for some more specific data. But I would submit that that the discipline that we have been doing, something is not working because it continues, the inappropriate behavior continues. And we hear about it, every couple of days, every week of inappropriate behavior. So whatever we're doing, we need to change it up some sort of a way. Either it needs to get more severe, or it needs to have we need some different outcomes, because the outcome is the same, because what we're hearing this year is the same as what we heard last year. So more of the same, you know that old saying about more of the same, you get the same. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hilton, and I saw Mac McLeod hand down there.
Yes, ma'am. Going back on what some fellow board members have said, if we've got students in this 10,000 and they're on their 3rd and 4th offense, why are we allowing them to continue to disrupt the students who are there trying to learn? And also, who is holding our school administrators accountable to make sure that they're following these codes?
Okay, those,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if that's a question or comment.
That's the question.
Who's holding administrators accountable for setting,
To make sure that they follow those codes.
well, from my office,
let me just interject here. I don't think that this group would be the persons
And I'm not
to
necessarily looking for a name.
answer or hold them responsible, because they handle the codes and providing that information. We are the board, and I think that we do need to have further discussion on this topic. We need to put some things in place to address our concerns, but we don't want to possibly try to point fingers or anything like this. It's all of our responsibility, because these are all of our students. Granted, we do need to address it, and it needs to be addressed today rather than tomorrow. But we need to get something in place on that. So I think someone asked that we revisit and look at those things, and I'm sure that our superintendent is here, and I'm sure that he also, along with his director, is making note of those things. So we would ask that you look at those things that have been addressed And it would be helpful to them that if we put something to them in writing as to exactly what we're asking that they come forward with, so that they can be intact with what we're asking for. So it would help them, I think, for us to identify the things that we're actually asking for. And I think I saw Dr. Baker over to my left.
Yes, ma'am, a request of 2 questions. Kelvin, in that category 1, confrontation, altercation, that's a fight, right? And not necessarily so. So the hit, kick, push, it's a little hazy there, I guess I would say.
Well, one thing, when the committee went over the policy in the past, you had codes in multiple categories, which posed a conflict when it came to the parents, why you chose this code in this category versus the other category. So what the committee did was, we only used the code once, but they made sure that there was a code at a lower as well as a higher level to address similar behavior. So an altercation, complication, it would be, in the past would be considered a fight. You just put fight in category 2. So now if it's a low-level situation, they didn't exchange blows, but they got in each other's face, administrator, based on the evidence, support defense, administrator could either see it as a category 1 or category 2. And the same thing as an elementary kid, 2 elementary kids tussling. They may not want to classify that as a fight, so they have the option of altercation, confrontation, because of the different developmental levels, so that the code was set up to address all offenses on different levels to accommodate for the 2 different populations.
And I would just say, that's probably part of the concern about inconsistencies with all the administrators, and basically the assistant principals are the ones that's going to deal with that discipline, and that probably contributes to some of the inconsistency with that discretion, but I understand the policy allows that. And the request, I know Mr. Reagan requested to get this, but in the past, the board every month received a discipline report, suspensions, expulsions, by race, by gender, by category, whatever the offense was. And that is very helpful for the board to be able to see each month and look at trends, look at what's happening in the community. And it used to be very simple. It was a page, basically, or maybe 2 pages. It had the school, it had the number of suspensions, number of expulsions, gender, and race. And it was very easy. Now, we periodically, over the last school year, we get a report. But it was a big old spreadsheet like this, and you couldn't follow it on your computer screen because you had to go back up there. But why can't we just get something very simple? And somebody in your office that works with you used to always do those reports. So I know that individual knows exactly how to do them. And it is so easy to follow. So that's my request. Could we, and I've shared this with the board chair and the superintendent, if we could get a monthly report. A year report, it overwhelms you, so to speak. And if we get a monthly report, going back to what Mr. Austin said, and we see a pattern or a trend, then let's see what we can put in place to curb this, or to do something to change that behavior pattern. So that would be very helpful, rather than at the end of the year, we get it all compiled. So that's my request.
And Dr. Baker, I would like to respond on that, because we did, and that suspension report that you're speaking of don't come from my office, well, haven't come from my office since I was here. Donna Barks normally prepared that, and the plan was to present you guys the data in that format, but based on the variables that was asked, she was unable to compile all that in a small enough document that wouldn't get confusing. So that's why we presented the charts, because we tried to get you guys what you were used to seeing, but Ms. Barth wasn't able to pull it together.
Well, talk to the individual in your office that used to preparing those reports, I believe that individual will know how to give us a very clear, concise report.
I'd
Yes.
just like to conclude with, excuse me, the information that Mr. Williams and I looked at and we prepared. It is based off the request that we were given. It's not that we were not trying to give you the information. We were giving you all of what was requested. Dr. Baker, the report that you're referencing is one that we've talked about. We're right at the beginning of the year. Excuse me. And we're going to ensure that you continue to get those reports because they would be helpful. And I do know that this kind of information may be overwhelming, not only to you, but to everyone else. It is to us. And we're going to continue to do all we can to get you that information so you can stay abreast. So just be on the lookout for that, and we're going to continue to make the modifications of things that you've requested. We'll break out pieces of information so that it can be better understood, and we'll bring that back to you. We have begun to work on that, so we'll make it happen.
And do your best to make it user-friendly.
Yes, sir. We'll do that.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Dr. McGaney, did we answer your questions okay, anyone has anything else to follow up with? If not, I'd like to thank the two of you for the report, and if you need any clarification on the request, please feel free to ask, and we'll make sure that you get that information.
We'll do that.
Okay? Thank you so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate you. Okay. And thank you, Dr. Wright, for your around the district report and everything else that followed. Yes, please, feel free.
Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, I want to say a couple of things about the last presentation that we just heard. First and foremost, we take the safety and security of our students and staff very seriously, so we're going to work diligently to look at the way that student discipline is handled in this district, and I've already charged the two gentlemen that you talked with tonight, as well as myself, of course, first and foremost. We're going to review the effectiveness, if you will, of our process throughout this year. Because of my, trying to figure out how to get this right for the item, because of my vast experience working with schools both in North and South Carolina, I've got an opportunity to deal with and work through codes of conduct, both as an assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and now going into year 10 as superintendent. So there are some items that could be more clear for our entire community. There's no question about that. School codes of conduct should be reviewed and updated every school year. You should look at what's working, what is not working, and then make the appropriate changes, updates in conjunction with policy each year. So this is certainly an opportune time for us to do that. The school year has started, so this year we're going to work diligently with what we have. We're going to track data. I think Mr. Williams and Mr. Myers would tell you that we've had extensive conversations already about that. And we'll continue to try to bring you the data that we have while here. But moving forward for the 23-24 school year, I'll go ahead and hint us all. That is one of the superintendent's goals that will be coming out really shortly to look at our student discipline process and make sure that it is working for us in 23, 24, and beyond. So, Madam Chair, I appreciate you allowing me to say that.
Okay, and I thank you and everyone else that came under the superintendent's report section for bringing us up to date and sharing with us for the good of the district.
Yes, ma'am.
And for the good of our information. Thank you so much. Per our agenda, the board is now entering into executive session. As a reminder, there is no set time frame for this portion of the meeting. We invite our in-person guests as well as our online viewers to join us again when we return to the open session. If you're unable to be with us at that time, We wish you a pleasant, safe week. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you upon our return.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
move that we enter into executive session for discussion of the monthly personnel report, appointment, compensation, promotion, demotion, discipline, termination, and/or receipt of employee, discussion of proviso 1.113 as it relates to the Sumter School District, discussion for capital projects reallocation requests, Fund 524 and 525, discussions to begin district-wide salary study.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion and a second for the board to enter into executive session for monthly personnel report, appointment, compensation, promotion, demotion, discipline, termination, and/or release of an employee. Discussion of proviso 1.113 as it relates to the Sumter School District. Discussion of the initial district-wide salary. And I was trying to, the capital project 524 and 525. Am I correct, Dr. Reagan? Is that what you said? Okay. Are there any questions or discussion? If not, please cast your vote. Okay, the motion passes unanimously, and the board is now in. Dr. Wright,
Yes,
do
ma'am.
you have a recommendation for moving, do you have a recommendation for 8.1?
Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, there is no action necessary. Recommendation is that no action be taken and is not necessary at this time regarding proviso 1.113.
Thank you. So there is no action necessary at this time for.
Yes, ma'am.
8.1.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, moving on to 8.2, the personnel report. Dr. Wright, do you have a recommendation for the personnel report?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, my recommendation is that the monthly personnel report as submitted in your documentation be approved at this time.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation that the personnel report presented be approved.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second has been made to accept the superintendent's recommendation for the board approval of the personnel report. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote. Okay, the motion passes. We're now down to 8.3. Mr. Superintendent?
Yes.
Is there
Yes, ma'am. There's a request for approval to reallocate capital project funds 524 and 525, as discussed by the finance director earlier. Recommend approval at this time.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the superintendent's request to reallocate the capital project funds 524 and 525.
Second.
There is a motion and a second that the board approves the request to reallocate capital project fund 524 and 525. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote. The motion passes. 8.4. Dr. Wright, is there a recommendation?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, I am requesting that administration be given permission to initiate a district-wide salary study, which would include all facets of personnel assessment and salary study assessment.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the superintendent's request to initiate a district-wide salary study.
Second.
There is a motion and a second that the board approves the superintendent's request to initiate a district-wide salary study. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote. The motion passes. With no objection, the consent agenda will stand approved. Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. I'd like to thank each of you for joining us this evening. To all our meeting participants and viewers, may you remain healthy and safe. Have a wonderful week. And there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 9:20 p.m. Thank you.